Season 2, Episode 11 is titled Mandala, meaning circle in Sanskrit. In Buddhism, it can refer to the Wheel of Life. The episode begins with Kambo's death, and ends with Skylar going into labor and giving birth. It is the circle of life and death. But in a more literal sense, I think you can also look at the title as the unfortunate cyclicality of life, and how all of our characters will fall back into their own and self-destructive ways. Jesse and Jane would both fall back on using, something that would destroy the both of them. Walter, for all of his promises of leaving the business, would only get sucked deeper into it when he makes contact with Gus. And Ted and Skylar too would circle back to their old and somewhat buried relationship that, this time around, would also include a healthy amount of fraud and an unhealthy amount of cringe. And in an even more literal sense, the episode opening with Tomas's bike wheel is a physical manifestation of that wheel of life. Kambo's death would spiral into all the Jesse and Jane stuff we see later in the episode, and that then spirals into all the Walter stuff we see and him missing the birth of his own child, and so on and so on. It is a largely isolated incident that somehow, someway, has these catastrophic cascading consequences touching countless other lives, which, going all the way back to the plane foreshadowing, is of course the entire motif of this season. The episode teaser opens with a classic, slightly ominous Gilligan scene of Tomas riding around with his bike. We cut to Kambo, dressed in all white, casually sipping on a drink. The color white in the series is the ultimate symbol of innocence, pacifism, and new beginnings. Despite being a part of the drug world and pretty brazenly challenging the other crews,
yo, you buying or you just stopping envy?
Kambo was never actually violent. As far as we know, the worst thing he has done, beyond the dealing of course, is stealing a baby Jesus when he was a kid.
You defeated my buddy Kambo. Stole baby Jesus. Maybe not like a real baby, just one of those things outside of the... I mean, what the hell did he even want that thing for? Huh? I mean, I still don't know. Dumbass.
Which, yeah, no idea why or how that is a thing, but he's of course also the person who hooked up Jesse with the RV in the first place. So as a whole, yeah, he's a part of some very, very bad things, but he himself is a pretty chill dude. And so with this scene, I think it's all about establishing this extremely stark contrast between the naivete of Walter's aggressive expansion and the cutthroat reality of what this trait is actually like. Even as Kambo catches on to the fact that he is being watched and calls for backup, he is circled like prey. To them, he's not even dangerous enough to dispose of immediately. He's so weak and unthreatening that they play with him, before finally... It is a haunting scene that extinguishes the final flickers of light that might have existed in this operation. Kambo's white becoming a canvas for the blood that will be spilled. This is an 11-year-old gunning down another dealer without so much as a second thought. We talked plenty about this already with the whole smashing towel dispenser thing, as well as with the pool scene, but this scene just cements all of that. Walter is not done, and the darkness is only beginning to take hold. Also, while the drink does have a bullet hole and it is very lore accurate, what's not lore accurate is the ground being dry, because all the drink should have spilled and it should have been wet. But with that, roll intro. Katie, I'm still not playing the song because I keep getting copyright strikes. Moving into the episode itself, Walt and Skylar are meeting with their doctors, the big news being that Walter's cancer may finally be operable. Real-world-wise, this is relatively rare, but is becoming increasingly more common thanks to better drugs. The difficulty, and most of the risk, comes from the fact that radiation therapy leaves behind scar tissue. The scar tissue messes up healing, which then causes a whole nother set of issues, but point being that, after a full round of radiation therapy, surgery is very complicated and relatively rare. And so the estimate of roughly 200,000 given to Walter is a bit on the higher end, but is definitely accurate if you actually include all the follow-up care. Narrative-wise though, I always read this as just a natural extension of the previous episode.
Skylar, there's rot.
On paper, Walter now has a whole lot of money, so he cut out the physical manifestation of guilt from the house, all the while telling himself that he is leaving the business. The whole story he told himself was exactly the same as with these doctors. You can do surface level repairs or just treat the cancer, but you're just waiting for it to spread, so you cut it out and start fresh. And so when the question turns to Walter, we might expect some kind of debates, some kind of back and forth between him and Skylar, like pretty much every other time. But no, he just confidently says,
I'll do it.
So, at this point, even if we assume the full $200,000 for the surgery, Walter would be sitting on roughly $400,000. It is shy of the $737,000 he calculated, but it is also literally $400,000. So, the cancer issue is solved, and he is $400,000 ahead of where he was. Surely, now it is really the time to just shut down shop and move on with his life, to start fresh. Except, we obviously know that doesn't happen, which again comes back to the fact that this was never truly about the cancer or even about his family. And while we're talking about his financial standing, one thing one of you mentioned in the comments and I never actually thought about is the water heater he bought. With every other purchase in the series, we always see Skylar doing the accounting and then even roasting Walter about putting it on like the wrong credit card and stuff. But with the water heater, there's never even a question of where the money came from, which obviously eventually climaxes in her sort of starting to ask these questions and figuring out that the money is indeed illegal, but in the episode itself, it's never brought up. It's not really important at all because, again, she eventually does catch on to all of it, but I do wonder what it would have looked like if we actually had this money question of always asking, wait, so we have the money to do this and that and this and that, so why all the shady business, right? It would have just been a natural reflection of the question we keep talking about, as in, was it ever about the money and actually getting what you need, or was it just about pride? But we then cut on over to Walter at school, going to check his burner phone.
I called like 20 times. Combo's dead.
Which one is he?
Now, this is morbidly funny. I would even say very funny, but I also think it's a genuine moment of him accidentally tipping his hand and revealing how he actually thinks about them. To him, they are all just abstract numbers, plans he can scale up and shift around whenever he needs to. I don't think it's him being just like straight up evil and writing off human life like it's nothing. I just think it's him being very much lost in the sauce. And speaking of,
why'd we have to go pushing into new turf, yo? What'd you expect?
I don't know.
Is that all you got?
Skinny Pete confronts Jesse about exactly this, saying Badger's already laying low after he got yoinked, and now with Combo gone, they just don't have the street cred to even survive. Jesse tries saying that they're on the verge of making serious money and whatnot, but his heart, too, is obviously not in it, because this whole ordeal is Walter's idea. Everything from the whole ATM Jesse Blowfish story to trying to expand their turf, even to pricing, Jesse has only ever been acting as the front man, while the actual chess master has always been Walter.
Sorry, Jesse. I'm out.
And just like that, Jesse's crew is done. Badger, Combo, and Skinny were supposed to be the head honchos who only then get their own sub-dealers. But now, that entire chain is obviously broken, and Walter is sitting on a good million doubloons worth of product, and no way to move it.
Strange in your neighborhood. Who you gonna call?
Better call Saul!
After a healthy dose of bickering about whose fault it was, they get down to business, with Walter saying that they have no distribution. But because this is Saul, his first question is a little bit sus.
How about you? How's the health situation?
I may have more time than I thought.
Outstanding.
On the face of it, it's just Saul trying to be diplomatic, right? He de-escalates their ranting and briefly pivots the conversation to something completely unrelated and a lot more neutral. But based on what we know now, I think this is him adjusting his expectations of Walter, because don't forget, Mike, who only half exists in this episode, has already pulled Walter's data. So to me, this is more so him gauging Walter's value, as in how much more money can he make before he, checks out. Jesse says they're currently sitting on 38 pounds of product, which of course makes Saul very, very happy, but Walt again says that they can't sell. But more importantly, he also slips in,
Payback, that's what we need.
I have been yapping about this over and over and over for all of Season 2, but I again have to stress just how insanely different this Walter is in approaching things. Not even talking about the pre-2Co days and the whole silent partner talk, just a handful of episodes ago, the whole MO of their operation was slow and steady. Top down, they controlled everything exactly because they wanted to remain under the radar. Sell quietly, make the money they both need, and just get out. That was it. But with the prior episode and Walter's extracurricular activities, and now this, it is about establishing dominance, even if it means spilling blood. Territory is no longer a matter of making money faster. Now it is straight up a turf war, and Walter is entirely up for taking part.
Let's start with some tough love. You two suck at peddling meth.
Walter, of course, refuses getting involved with another high-level dealer, largely because his view of the illegal trade is still limited to the likes of Tuco, which I honestly find a little bit surprising considering how infamous major cartels are. At a top level, all of the big cartels run tighter books than legit businesses, which is doubly funny considering what we see with Ted, but with Walter being a history nerd, I think he should have been well aware of that. Then again, I guess you could also say that he is probably aware of this, and he just didn't assume that he's going to be put in contact with, like, I don't know, the Cali cartel. So he's kind of just like, yeah, I don't want to deal with another Tuco, because he's not talking about a, well, I guess Gus Fring-like figure.
Let's just say I know a guy who knows a guy. From what I do hear about him, he sounds a little like you.
And thus begins the Chicken Man sus Gus arc, but taking a quick step back for a moment, in Better Call Saul, we learned that Mike initially didn't even bother to pass Walter's files by Gus, saying Walter is just not worth the trouble. But now that his cancer actually seems to be a solvable problem, Saul just sees big flashing money signs and goes against Mike's, in hindsight, completely accurate assessment of the Heisenberger. Before we get to old sus Gus though, we jump to Jesse and Jane hanging out and watching TV, and this is where things get all kinds of terrible.
I need you to leave.
Jesse is spiraling after Combo's death, and because he's genuinely head over heels in love with Jane, he just wants to make sure that she is as far away from the proverbial blast zone as possible. He tells her that there's stuff she doesn't know, to which she just immediately says, yeah, he's a drug dealer. And with that secret in the open, he just tells her what happened, saying he's going to smoke and that he wants her to leave.
I just think you should go, being that you're in the program and all, and...
You could come with me to a meeting.
And I mean, with a scene like this, it's all just bad and miserable, especially in hindsight. Jesse is trying to protect her from himself. He genuinely wants her to break free from using entirely, so he tells her to just please leave. But Jane also cares about him. She wants to help, to just be around him while he grieves, and to help him get out of the same hole she knows all too well.
It won't help.
They are both at a complete impasse where the only way forward is the inevitable misery of falling back on using. And in hindsight, it of course all just gets worse because we know that Jane eventually becomes an enabler for Jesse, which spirals into even more destruction all around. On one hand, we will see that Jane is incredibly toxic and not exactly good for Jesse, but at the same time, before Jesse came around, she was clean, and she genuinely tried helping Jesse get clean as well. They are both victims to an extent, but they're both also to blame to an extent, so it's just kind of misery all around. I absolutely love how this shot is done, with the door becoming this very real manifestation of the metaphorical doors she leaves closed. By turning around and returning to Jesse, she never escapes to the light outside. She turns her back on a better life that was just a paper's width away and remains trapped in this sickly yellow prison that will only bring more ruin. Absolute cinema.
We're in the big time now.
First off, the color scheme of the entire building is the usual Breaking Bad color shenanigans, with the whole color scheme of Los Pollos Hermanos being a mix of yellow, blue, and red. Yellow symbolizes the suffering of meth, which I think is pretty self-explanatory. Blue is the magic of chemistry, power, and purity. This is Gus's domain, an entire empire hidden in plain sight. He knows everything about them, even casually strolling up to their table to ask if everything is alright, but he himself is untouchable. And finally, there is red, which is blood, violence, and criminality, which too I think is pretty self-explanatory. Secondly, while Walter doesn't really explicitly address it, only noting that he is late and that he should get something to eat, Jesse is very clearly coming off of a good time, so when Gus swings by their table, yeah, the jig is up. Though I do wonder how this hypothetical deal would have actually gone, because like, he swings by their table, right? Then he sees Jesse, and then he basically calls it off, but what if he didn't? Was he actually going to talk to them here and now, or was all of this just a sort of a vibe check and he already has their files, and the rest would be done by someone else like we see at the end of the episode? I guess we'll never know for sure, because I do think the Gus actually swinging by their table is more so a TV thing, as opposed to an actual realistic thing of him doing anything, but it does make me wonder how it might have actually gone. And thirdly, we also see Jesse begin to very explicitly ask the important questions regarding their little venture.
A week ago, you talked like you were all ready to hang it up. Like, I got bills, I gotta make more.
Jesse's timing with these questions is a little bit off, considering they really do have to sell basically the whole batch. But as a whole, these are all very, very good questions that we as the audience are also discussing, because Walter cannot answer them. He might take a little break here and there, but eventually it is his ego that is pulling him back into the business. The money was never really the root cause.
Hey. Oh man, you would not believe the traffic.
This is of course a very bad omen for Skylar actually giving birth, as Walter would miss that too. But throughout the season, we have seen Skylar slowly but surely piecing together all the weirdness going on with Walter. So I think this is just another small thing for her to keep in mind. And then there would be Walter missing the actual birth, and then there's that little fact that he calmly agreed to a $200,000 surgery, which, yeah, that's probably the biggest one.
Isn't that a Friday the 13th?
This is where I would mauled out all the way to Monday the 16th, but you know what? Instead of mauling, I'll just sit here with a brief, judgmental moment of silence. During my moment of silent judgment, I realized I don't even know the source of this superstition, so I went on a bit of a lore hunt, and as it turns out, it is even more stupid than I thought, and no one even really knows where it actually comes from. Unlucky 13 appears in Norse myth, where 12 gods are having a dinner party in Valhalla. The trickster god Loki, who was of course not invited, showed up as the 13th guest. He did a whole bunch of shenanigans that made the god of darkness kill the god of joy, and so 13, for the 13th guest, became unlucky. Another supposed source is the Last Supper, where 13 individuals were present on the night before Good Friday, and so also you have 13 and you have Friday. Others point to the fact that, historically, public hangings in Britain were commonly held on Fridays, so that's where the Friday might come from. And what makes matters even more complicated is that Spanish-speaking countries consider 13 to also be unlucky, but the day is Tuesday and not Friday. So it's not totally culturally different from Japan, where number 4 is unlucky, but the details around the day still differ enough to make the actual evolution of these supposedly unlucky days very, very hard to trace. There are similarities, which implies a similar source, but at some point they diverge, so where does the combination come from? Who knows? And the funniest part of all of this is that before Friday the 13th became the horror icon we know of today, it was first popularized by, and listen closely here, a financial thriller focusing on Wall Street stockbrokers. Again, it didn't create the idea of the unlucky Friday 13th, but it definitely solidified it in the cultural zeitgeist going into the 20th century, and eventually its appearance in modern horror. Saying that, I will now return to silent judgment. Man, I hate superstitions. We cut back to Jesse's house, which has quickly transformed into, well, whatever this is. And honestly, this makes me a tad confused because, like, it's never implied that a bunch of time passes. As far as we know, it's not like a whole week goes by. And with the Jane scene we just saw, the room was completely clean. So, like, what happened? Is this performative doomerism? How is there so much trash everywhere? What happened? Was there like an explosion? It's weird.
You know that museum in Santa Fe you talked about? Let's take a drive.
This is pretty much the point where that whole dynamic between Jesse and Jane flips on its head. Now, it is Jesse trying to just do stuff and live instead of wallowing in misery, but unfortunately, Jane has already been pulled back in, and it's only downhill from here, very neatly encapsulated by the yellow sheets that she's wrapped up in.
Oh my God. Wait, Skylar,
Yes.
I want to hear it first.
Absolutely not. No way.
Come on, you cannot deny your employer's birthday wish.
Yes, I can.
And this takes us to the scene that shall not be named.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday.
Let us all pause for another moment of silent judgment. This scene haunts me. It is so unfathomably cringe. Like, I'm just going to date this video and straight up say I think I would rather spend 4 hours watching people say 6-7 than watch this single scene. It is so bad. I know it's a bit of a hot take in the Breaking Bad community. I know a lot of you very, very much enjoy this. Some even say this is their favorite scene, so let me just play it again for you real quick.
Happy birthday.
Returning to Walter, he's crashing about how Gus was apparently not even there. It goes back and forth for a bit, with Saul saying that this guy is just very, very careful and everything, but like we see later, it all just comes down to the fact that Jesse was high and Gus saw trouble. But with Walter being Walter, he returns to the restaurant and just camps out. And note how this time around, Gus's shirt is just yellow, with him now blending into the rest of the restaurant. He is no longer the kingpin actively looking for new allies. Now, he is invisible. Also, the cinematography throughout this entire sequence is so cool. Whenever I come back to Breaking Bad, I always have a bit of a wake-up moment that, wait, colors are actually allowed. Not everything needs to be gray, blue, or yellow. But a whole 2 hours later, with Walter even finishing his little Happy Meal, we get another really cool shot of Gus just ominously watching Walter, before suddenly fading right back into the background. A beautiful little sequence that I think perfectly encapsulates who Gus is. He is always aware of your presence, always looking over your shoulder, always ready to pounce, but the moment you notice him, he disappears.
Diet Coke, please.
And 5 minutes of your time.
Well, I guess Walter did sense his aura and did indeed notice him, but yes, they sit down for a chat. Gus, of course, doesn't play along initially, but eventually, Walter seems to hit a nerve.
I suggest you submit it through our email system.
I was told that the man I would be meeting with is very careful. I believe we're alike in that way.
I don't think we're alike at all, Mr. White.
This scene is so good. The way his face shifts ever so slightly as he changes from the nice chicken man to sus Gus is absolutely chilling. And the slight shift in his voice just adds to that. He immediately has a presence that is somehow infinitely scarier than Tuco without ever really doing anything. He instantly goes from being this mysterious dude Walter might have suspected of being the guy to completely controlling the situation, with him immediately calling Walter by his name. This is not a negotiation or even a conversation. This is just Gus allowing Walter to say his piece. I think with Gus, it was always that air of ambiguity as to what he knows and what he's thinking that made him a absolutely terrifying villain. And strap in, because while he is a legend now, his story before Breaking Bad is all kinds of crazy and honestly very, very sad. His family's financial situation was so bad that he was genuinely thinking of a way to arrange his own murder for insurance money, with him saying that Breaking Bad was ultimately the thing that really saved him. It is absolutely crazy to me that someone hadn't yoinked him for a villain role like years ago, because again, he is terrifying. Whether he is Gus or the dentist in Payday or Anton in the admittedly aggressively mid Far Cry 6, he is always very, very spooky. Glazing aside, Gus just roasts Walter, saying he's not careful at all. Jesse was late and high. Walt obviously doesn't have a comeback to that, so he instead pivots to the product.
Are you familiar with my product?
I've been told it's excellent.
It is impeccable.
Luckily for Walt, Gus is very much a product is king type of guy, but this is of course where the eternal drama of Walter wanting to keep Jesse close starts. He says that it's because Jesse does what he says and that he trusts him. And while that might be true to an extent, I think it more so comes back to that emotional connection that he has with Jesse. Like we've already seen him trying to teach and otherwise genuinely try and help him, they do have a slightly odd but still a father-son type relationship, which perhaps surprisingly, Walter isn't ready to give up even if millions of dollars are involved. Jesse is, and always will be, his weak spot. The last and perhaps only true connection that he'd hold on to even when everything comes crashing down. But despite making their deal, Gus still insists that
you can never trust a drug addict.
Good advice, I guess, considering what would happen with Jane, but yeah, not exactly smooth sailing. And what is even more, I guess, stormier sailing is what we see on Skylar's side.
We're talking nearly $1 million of undocumented revenue.
A healthy bit of fraud right there, but of course, Ted breaks into his own rationalizations of the economy being bad, how he has people working for him and that they need to pay their mortgages, yada yada. But this is obviously like bad.
I'm not gonna turn you in, Ted.
From the outside looking in, you'd almost believe that it was in fact Skylar breaking bad. You know, a drug business here, money laundering there, a little bit of fraud there, a few guys smooth fight in between. Unfortunately, she really does seem to be the single connective thread for a bunch of people doing a bunch of crime, which, not great. Plot-wise though, I think the Ted subplot was always meant to be both sort of a bridge to her eventually being a criminal accomplice to Walter, but also a sort of a loss of an escape. Ted represented the honest and stable businessman who would offer the warmth and connection she was missing from Walter. It was an escape from his moral erosion. But by choosing to cook the books with the excuse of protecting herself from the IRS, she too begins her downward spiral. The proverbial seal is broken, and it becomes easier to tolerate and excuse whatever comes next. Soon enough, she won't need the excuse of protecting herself, and she would agree to launder Walter's money without much opposition, even if the existential threat was gone. We'll be talking all about the parallels between her and Walter, the hypocrisy we see on both sides, and all that weaponized despair that we see with her, so put a pin in that for now.
Yo, it's Skinny Pete, just checking in with you, man. We missed you at the funeral today. Guess you had something bigger going down. Watch your back out there, bro. Peace.
We have had the most cringe scenes, now we get to the only scene in the series that has me covering my eyes like a 5-year-old because I hate needles. In the Inside episode commentary, Aaron and Paul noted that they had an ex-addict as a consultant to make this whole sequence feel as real and raw as possible, which I think definitely comes across in this episode. It really does feel uncomfortable and unpleasant, but maybe that's just me because I can't see half the scene for already mentioned reasons. The scene of Jesse floating off, though, is like the coolest thing ever and also done entirely practically. There is a wooden board underneath Aaron and a camera on a crane that is just moving upward. Pretty sure you can even see the sides of where the soundstage walls end, but unfortunately, I don't think there's much behind the scenes footage, bar a few photos here and there. I'm sure someone with more technical experience could explain how this effect was achieved, but I think because they chose to retain perfect lighting on Jesse's face, as well as the lens they chose, the entire scene has this weirdly surreal look to it, even beyond the literal levitation. You'd be excused for thinking that Jesse is on a green screen because, again, his face remains lit, but with the lens, there is this, like, slight warping around the room, and it really does seem real, but weirdly abstract. I love it. Absolutely beautifully done. It is definitely up there for me with the best cinematography that we see in the series. Seems to truly be a lost modern art, unfortunately.
Phone's off, please. Pipes, I guess.
Literally the goofiest thing ever, but yes, Walter gets a message for Pollos.
38 pounds, $1.2 million, truck stop, 2 miles south of exit 13 on the 25.
Because this is Breaking Bad, this is of course where literally everything explodes in spectacular fashion. Jesse is obviously flying high as a kite, and the foreshadowing from earlier in the episode already sees a payoff as Skylar starts going into labor. Beautiful direction here with having the phone constantly ringing as Walter runs through the house. Like, sure, the entire situation is already crazy and the music is intense as hell, but it's that phone ringing that I think grounds the whole scene in something incredibly familiar that builds this weird other kind of subtle anxiety. Maybe I'm just a weirdo, but hearing a phone just ringing and ringing, even if I know it's not going to be picked up, just makes me feel on edge for some reason, as if I'm about to miss something important or something entirely unexpected might happen. Not sure if I'm overthinking it, but to me at least, the phone really works as this one grounding thing in this entire sequence. Also, very, very lore inaccurate trash bag. Like, I'm sorry, Jesse of all people is not sorting his trash. That bag would have all kinds of forbidden trash juices at the bottom, and it sure as hell wouldn't be perfectly white. 0 out of 10, Vince. Okay, we talked about weird trash bags, but it turns out that Jesse's house is also haunted because when Meth Santa Walter starts to flee, you can see a person poking out of the closet. No, it is not someone from the film crew, okay? It is in fact the Flying Dutchman wanting a piece of the coin. But that is where the episode ends. Walter sacrificing the birth of his child for a promised future and the final, not so final deal. Full circle, Jesse is back to his most self-destructive ways, and Walter is abandoning his family in their most vulnerable for a brand new deal. And with that, that is Mandala. This is another one of those episodes where we're getting close to the season finale, and somehow, some way, like 5 episodes of plot happens within a single episode. It's kind of crazy how much happens. Combo's death in isolation is already a massive, massive deal for Jesse's character. He feels like he practically killed him himself. That was his responsibility. So that being just the cold open, which then spirals into the Jane stuff, which even watching the series for the first time, I'm sure most of us could have seen the writing on the wall. So with Jane's death in the following episode, a crazy amount of development happens, and that's not even mentioning Gus, who I personally at least view as the ultimate big bad of Breaking Bad. You know, the whole face-off arc, I feel like that was the most insane part of Breaking Bad. And we meet him here, which is just an extra plot to what's going on with Jesse. Again, a crazy amount of stuff happens in this episode, and I love it. And you know what else I love? Yup, that's right, our YouTube members and patrons, who I want to give a massive thank you to. And let's also give a warm welcome to the newest members of the team: Stormcrown9602, Hey, Airdink, I think, KNZA4088, Hussein Salameh, I think, 5907, Endless Wonder, and JM Crocs. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.